Welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions from real worship leaders. If you're a real worship leader with a real question and you want a real answer, head right here, leadingworshipwell.com/real talk to submit your question for a future episode, and I might answer it. Got some good questions this week. Let's talk about it. You've mentioned many times when discussing song selections to pick songs based on what my congregation needs to hear. I have a small congregation, but I'm not sure how to tell what my congregation needs to hear. I'm a new worship leader only since about August 2022. Thank you, Peggy. Well, thanks again for your question, Peggy. I know you've sent in a couple, so keep sending them in, and I'll keep answering them. When I talk about, and this is a phrase that I've used frequently, is like whenever we think about song selections, we need to think about what the people in our church need to hear. Now, there is a very specific or very important context that I use that phrase in, and that is to counter the idea that we just pick songs that we like to sing. So I don't usually just say pick songs that your people need to hear. I say don't just pick songs you want to sing, pick songs people need to hear. That's the context that I use it in. And so when it's revealed in that context, what I mean by that phrase, pick songs that people need to hear, is I'm saying think of your church when you pick the songs for your worship gatherings. Don't just think about what songs did I like, what songs stuck out to me this week, what songs are speaking to me right now. We need to lead with our church in mind, because when we are gathered together for worship, we're gathered together for worship, and it's not just about a personal worship moment between us, the leader, and God. And if I worship hard enough, people will see and follow suit no matter what the songs are. Our purpose together is to gather together to edify the people around us and glorify God in the process. So, if we want to edify each other, the best way we can do that is by thinking of the people around us and singing songs that relate to their lives. And so, that's ultimately what I'm getting at when I say, let's sing songs that our church needs to, I think I have said need to hear, but also that we need to sing. Because it's not just about hearing. It's not like I'm just up on stage singing songs and people are hearing them. We're supposed to be singing together. So what truth do people need to hear and respond to? That's the question you should be asking. Now, that was to answer the question, what does that phrase mean? What does my church need to hear? How do we actually do that? How do we actually find those things? And it's really simple. We don't need to overcomplicate it. We don't need to over-spiritualize it. We know what our church needs to hear because we know our church. We know, and our church is made up of individual people. So if you want to know what your church needs to sing, go talk to people in your church, and don't ask them, hey, what do you need to sing? Ask them, hey, what's going on in your life? What is God doing in your life right now? What are you struggling with? What are you celebrating? And this isn't like some exercise that I'm giving you so that you can pick better songs and people will finally sing on Sunday. This is just something that you should be doing as a church leader so that we can actually lead the people in our church in a specific way, thinking about the specific things that are going on in their lives and not just giving them general truths every Sunday. And so if you want to pick songs that people need to hear, then you have to actually know what they need to hear and respond to. And so go talk to the people in your church, or if you already have relationships with the people in your church, think of those relationships and ask yourself, what is going on in the lives of the people of my church right now? And think about specific people. Think about where they're at in life. Think about what's going on. Think about the conversations that you've had. And then you'll start to see common themes between these people. Then you think about what truths do they need to hear in those specific circumstances. And you pick songs that speak into their specific circumstances and will allow them to be edified, the ultimate goal of our corporate worship gatherings, one of the goals, along with glorifying God, to edify the believers. How can I edify the believers in my church, the people in my church, specifically in the season of life that they're in? So, on an individual level, there's that. But then we can also think about in the life of my church as a whole. We are both individual stones. We are living stones being built up into the temple of God, but we are also the temple of God. I don't know why I put temple in quotes, but the Bible says we are the temple of God, right? Like God dwells among his people. And so I say that because we are both individual, but we are also one church. We are the church. And so we can think about it on an individual level. We can think about it on a church as one body level. And so once you think about the individual things going on in people's lives, think about what's going on in the life of my church. What is the direction that my pastor, the vision that my pastor has laid out for our church to move toward? What is going on? Is there anything big happening at my church that we can respond to? Anything specific that we're doing, any specific missions that we're doing, any specific events that we're doing at church, and how can we respond to what God is doing in our church? So think about it from an individual perspective. Think about it from a church-wide perspective, and that will give you enough direction to start picking songs that you don't just want to sing, but songs that your church needs to hear the truth of and sing together so that we can edify each other. I have more than 10 years of leading worship in my previous church. After joining a new church, our pastor has asked me to play guitar. There are 2 young, talented song leaders whom I respect and submit to. Due to my previous experience, I have suggestions for improving the team, but the leaders don't seem to take suggestions from anyone except the pastor. For an example, there's no introduction of a new song to the congregation before it's played in worship. How can I make a difference in this team? I think I need to do a video, like a Friday video, a whole video about how to impact your team when you aren't in charge, because this is a question that I get all the time. This isn't a question that's unique to you, but I like that you actually acknowledge that you aren't in charge of the team, and I love that you say, I'm under 2 younger, talented song leaders who I respect and submit to. I love that you actually recognize that you aren't in charge, because some people who ask me the sentiment of this question, they're like, I play the triangle in my worship team. How do I get people to memorize their music? And it's like, well, all you do is hit the triangle. I know, I'm making an extreme example there. But that is important to recognize that you are not the leader. And so the way that we lead our team when we are not the leader is not the same as if we were the leader of our team. Being the actual leader of your team grants you the opportunity and the ability to do things that you don't have if you're just a normal member of the team. Because somebody's in charge and somebody has more authority in the team. And that's not a bad thing. That's just leadership structures in the church. And so the question is, when I do not have the authority of being a leader on my team, how do I still influence my team? So like I said, I really do think that I should do a video on this question, like a full-length video, because I get this question all the time. But let me just give a few thoughts here. Number 1, lead by example. That is the best thing that you can do. Whatever change you want to see on your team, do it, like above and beyond. If you're a worship team member and you want people to show up on time to rehearsal, you better be there, set up and ready to go every single week on time. If you want people to memorize their music on your worship team, you better have every song memorized and be able to play it perfectly. My point is, if you want to make a difference in your team, it really starts by leading by example and allowing other people to see what you're doing and see the benefits of it, and then saying, man, I want that for myself. We need to be attractive worship team members where people can't help but look at you and say, I do not lead worship like that person. I don't know what they're doing, but whatever they're doing, I want to be that way. That is the ultimate goal. That's what it means to lead by example. We want to make the way that we act on our team as attractive as possible to the people around us so that they want it. That's where it starts, and you don't have to say anything to anybody to make that happen. I've talked about this idea before of gaining respect through unwavering excellence. One of the ways we can gain respect is by being excellent in what we do. And this isn't in a prideful way. This is in a humble way of just being good at what we do. And I think I talked about that in the context before of like leading our friends and family on the worship team, and our friends and family don't respect us because they're our friends and family, or they don't respect us as the leader because they just see us as friends or family members. But I talked about before, If we do things with unwavering excellence, then they will be like, man, I know Spencer is my brother. I know Spencer is my friend, but the way that he leads worship, I admire and respect that. And I'm not saying that I always live up to that. I'm just using this as an example of what we want to see. We want people to look at us and be like, this person is so good at what they do. I need to learn how they do it. And then people come up to us and they're like, can you teach me how to lead that way? I see that you are leading with excellence, and I want to be excellent myself. So, lead by example. And number 2, I think, and I'm not sure how this works in every team, but for my team, we have devotionals every week. We have a devotional time during our worship rehearsal where we get together and we talk. By the way, if you don't have devotionals at your worship rehearsal, I think that's one of the key elements to it, which is why it's included in the worship rehearsal blueprint that I'll link down below, where I give you 5 key pieces to a worship rehearsal that will make sure that you lead your team well spiritually, relationally, and musically. So check that out down in the description below. But a devotional time is one of those key pieces. And in that devotional time, it's not just me talking to people. It is our team talking together. And so I hope that you have a time like that where you're discussing what it means to be a worship leader in your team. If you have those times, utilize those times to share your opinions on things. I learn from my worship team members all the time. They share perspectives that I've never thought about. So maybe the people on your worship team, they just aren't thinking about certain things, and you can point it out to them during these conversational times. Maybe it's not even a devotional time, but you're just having a casual conversation. Now, that being said, I think this leads to the 3rd point. So far we've talked about leading by example, utilizing conversations. If you're having conversations, don't be afraid to share your opinions. Don't force it on other people, but don't be afraid to share what you think about things. Like saying, man, I know for me, memorizing my music has helped me so much because of X, Y, and Z. That's how I would have that conversation. I wouldn't say, so you need to memorize your music. Just talk about yourself and how it's helped you. And then the 3rd thing is it all comes from relationship. If you stepped into this team as a new person, then you're probably still building relationships with these guys. So just focus on building a relationship. We can't make any change until we've built a relationship with people. And then you start to influence each other once you have a working relationship. So focus on just being a friend, being a worship team member, a nice guy on the worship team. And don't think, I used to be in charge of a worship ministry and I've been doing this for longer than you, so I'm going to tell you everything to do. That's not how mentoring relationships work. Be a nice person, be a pleasant person to be around, be a friend to these people, and eventually you will be able to influence them in a way that will actually be sustainable. So like I said, make sure to check out down below the worship rehearsal blueprint if you need time to have those relational discussions in your worship rehearsals. I give you a step-by-step blueprint for leading the perfect worship rehearsal that leads your team well musically so they're ready to play on Sunday, but also spiritually so they grow closer to God, and in relationship to what we just talked about during this episode, relationally, so that they grow closer to each other and you can grow closer to them and have an influence on them. So check out the worship rehearsal blueprint linked down in the description below. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.